Welcome everyone to the quorumless and abbreviated meeting of the Brattleboro Planning Commission from Monday, December 13th, 2010. Excuse me. We're going to, rather than go through the agenda as warned, since we don't have a quorum and we have a couple of people that need to leave relatively quickly, or 7 o'clock actually. We're going to go right into the discussion of the town plan, specifically the Arts and Culture chapter. And I'd like to welcome people from the Arts Committee. Thanks for coming. I think what we had in mind for starters was to hear from you folks about the work that you have done. Of course, we have heard a lot about it in the past, but to give us a little bit of information about the process and the content as we have it here, and then we'll want to ask some questions and have a bit of a discussion ourselves along with you. But so I don't know if somebody was going to be the person to start that off, but
could we have them introduce them, each of them, because I don't know all those people.
I love Carolina. So actually, if you would please introduce yourselves, that would be great.
So good afternoon. Thanks for joining us here. I'm Hugh Keelan. I'm the chair of the committee, and I guess at this point, everybody's asked me to be the immediate field, but I'll be very hastily handing it down the line.
I'm Doug Cox.
Kate Anderson.
Judy Zemmel. Sarah Rice.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming. And why don't we do the same? James, you want to?
Sure. I think you guys know me. I'm James Valenti. I'm the one who came with Jim to your meeting if anyone wasn't there. Okay.
I'm Gary Goodemote.
Carolina Oleksu. And I know some of you, I think I've actually painted next to you at the senior center maybe. On a Tuesday or a Thursday morning. Yeah, I came once.
And you know Rod and Sue. Yeah. Okay. So would you like to start then? Talk about, what we have in our packet today is about vision and goals and action items. And then we also, Sue put the arts and culture inventory, so we'll be talking about that as well.
May I say a little piece about, you alluded to a question of sort of the process by how we end up sitting here with the documents that we have. And I won't get too historical about it, but the important things for us as a committee was last January to be opening our committee doors to the public through a charrette process with just a set of questions, no answers at all, to solicit feedback and ideas from as wide a public as we could humanly reach. So it did not mean those who were necessarily practicing art, or educators, could be art consumers, people with hostility to the art, no interest or whatever. We wanted to bring really a whole public into the discussion. And what was interesting for us in the committee was we were led to understand that we had the potential to occupy a significant position in the new style of town plan. So that was the carrot in front of us as a committee. And the method that we used was to go to, as I say, as broad a public as we could manage. And we were very proud of the numbers of people who attended. We sat them down charrette style, and we have worked steadily with the results in probably 4, 5, 6 different formats since then. So what you're looking at in front of you is not our ideas. This is what we have taken and redacted from what the public has brought in. And we hope we've been truthful and respectful to the things that we've been told and not interpolated ourselves too much for that. But that is very certainly the goal, that we wouldn't do that. And that is, in highly redacted, revised form, what you're looking at are the things that we believe are important for commissioners and town planners to know about.
Did you guys also do this inventory of the different arts organizations? Did that come from you guys also?
That
Sue,
came,
I don't
yeah,
know before that.
it's in the existing, it's basically the foundation of the existing town chapter in the town plan, but with my updates to it because it was missing some organizations. I see this as an inventory that will probably be an appendix where the chapter is going to discuss more of the issues than the way the current chapter is set up.
So we have a compendium as well. That we
Yeah.
can
Great,
add.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's still some missing there.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
only unless we would be interested in revisiting and
Yeah, good.
adding to.
Great.
Yeah, we knew it was incomplete. I mean, it's just, we wanted to get it complete, more complete.
Yep.
If I can add in here, I think it's important to note that these goals came from the charrette. Indeed, the charrette was meant to be sort of a parallel track of developing input for the town plan, chapter on culture and history, as well a development of a sort of a nascent strategic plan for the arts sector. So the group there was aware that there was more than just the town plan going on.
And I guess I'll just ask questions as we go here. The arts sector, as represented by an organization, or is there that
As-
sort of thing?
Probably, I would answer that as represented by those who came to the charrette, and then the networking beyond that, we disseminated the information and did get some feedback from a larger community
I mean,
within
beyond
arts.
the arts
Yeah, no, I do
professionals
mean arts
and things,
sector
or-
community,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
So are you actually the town arts committee?
We are.
We are.
You are, okay.
So the action items and, well, I'm sorry, so the parallel track then is the town plan and the loose confederation of people that are involved in the arts. And since then, is there, do you have a notion about whether that loose confederation will be a tighter confederation, or is there any sort of organizational stuff that's happened about all that, or would you say? Just curious.
I can answer certainly yes. So a goal has been to harness, apart from the two goals you've heard already described, has been to harness the enthusiasm and the sort of person power of that very large group and involve them as best we can. They probably can't be a confederacy because they're quite simply so diverse, and their relationship to the arts is so different, which is exactly what we wanted. We didn't want, the solid people who are right there all the time, maybe with a big institution behind them, and advocacy for their point of view. We wanted that. That's by no means what we wanted. We wanted basically everything. So I guess we're not, I don't think, I'll be corrected, but I don't think we're trying to hold them together in a confederacy so much as a loose association of ideas and possibilities, and we continually refer back to them. They have open invitations to our meetings. We ask people who had involvement with charrette to come back at specific points and advise us. So are we handling this right? So you look at us tweaking, working with this big mess of information, are we handling that correctly? And again, I hope we've had positive feedback about that as we've walked towards the table we're sitting with you.
Okay. Judy?
So, is what you're asking how we're going to take these goals and action items, and who's going to make it happen? How is it going to happen? Is that what you're asking?
Well,
Is-
not necessarily. I mean, I'm curious, for one thing, whether the big meeting and all the work that you've done to sort through and state what the sentiment of the group or the people in the group was. So I'm interested to know if that has developed into anything, you know, if that second track has developed into something that's an action in itself, you know.
So I'd like to speak to that, but I'm not sure everyone here will agree with what I'm saying. We'll see, okay? Is that we are a new committee. We had to go through the whole process of figuring out what a town arts committee did. It took a lot of time and energy. We're volunteers. We meet once or maybe twice a month. And then the processing of the information from the charrette was an enormous job. I mean, it's down to one page,
I know.
the input of 50 people in a whole evening. So an awful lot of our energy and work is still going into making a structure, making systems, figuring it all out. We're still new.
Uh-huh.
And I think this is how I hear it, when you ask what organizations are, if an organization has coalesced or what organizations will do the work, I think it may be some new, it may be something new and different that we haven't quite seen yet. We haven't completed that end of it, but so far we are working. My structural view of it is that we're the hub of a wheel, and we have subcommittees, so because our group couldn't do the whole thing. So when it was time to, for example, do the transportation building mural, a group of people did that was related to our committee. And I think a lot of the work that will happen will be done that way.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
I don't want you to think that I had an expectation or was like thinking that something should have happened, that I just wanted to know if something, you know, where you're at, I guess. So that's pretty clear to me.
I think I'll say a little bit about the Alliance for the Arts AFTA that I think served this role. It grew out of leadership of the nonprofit arts organizations, the major organizations within the Brattleboro area.
Is this gone now?
Yes, it's currently inactive.
Okay, sorry.
And that this was formed, 4 or 5 years ago, I think, at this
Yeah.
point, and lasted for about 3 years. And began to serve this function of sort of central information sharing, looking for opportunities for collaboration. And I think many of us saw that as being quite successful, but depended upon volunteer labor. A great deal of the initial energy came from Zonistas, who was taking time from his work with the Brattleboro Music Center, and Constantine taking time from the museum, and putting that effort into this project. Part of what that group saw initially was the value to the community of ongoing coordination, communication, and I think what AFTA discovered is that you can't do that on volunteer labor. That ultimately the organizations that these people represented have strong demands on their time and money. That part of the nature of the arts is that it spends every penny that it can find on producing its art, and tends to underfund for long-term development. There was a very interesting study done in California about 4 years ago, something like that, analyzing the arts sector. Its major finding was that it was significantly underfunded in terms of long-term sustainability. If you compared it with any other industry, that what it produced compared with what it was investing and working toward for the future was it just didn't compare. So and I think this is to my thinking an inherent nature of arts and artists is to do this. So I think one of the questions that as a community that we face is, where does the investment come from in order to be able to put in place the foundations that will allow the current organizations to function efficiently, that will allow the democratization, the full access to the arts to be worked toward on a community-wide basis, that will look for opportunities for joint collaborative art production and marketing. These are things that but I don't believe that we currently have a structure functioning to be able to do this. The genius, if there will, of AFTA was that it was Brattleboro focused. We have the County Arts Committee that, while it does focus largely on Brattleboro, is at least nominally serving the entire county and not just Brattleboro. My own thinking is that something like AFTA should probably be reinstated. And I'm not sure how that relates to the Town Arts Committee. I've seen the Town Arts Committee as being primarily ways to make the town's infrastructure and resources available to the arts community and the arts community available to town government and functions. But there's this whole world of how do you develop both the nonprofit arts community that's out there and the very large for-profit arts community that we have here. And I think that it isn't clear to me that falls within the natural work of the Town Arts Committee. I think that we're still sorting that out. And I think that we may look toward the town plan as a place to see how much is the town and town government interested in being a part of solving the problems or of helping to provide a playing field for the arts in this community that is going to be most highly productive.
To pick up on Doug's discussion of AFTA, which is the Alliance for the Arts, there are two sides of a coin in that experience. It supported different groups. They developed at the expense of AFTA. So the fact that AFTA itself didn't have its own structural support was then played out with AFTA sort of exhausting itself. But the groups that it originally addressed did benefit greatly from it and grew, and then were too busy to continue working with AFTA.
So, are you saying that AFTA kind of spun organizations and then?
No, it was considered a non-organization, and it did not have members or anything. But for instance, it was early on in the development of both the New England Center for Circus Arts and the New England Youth Theater. They benefited from AFTA's information sharing and mentorship and community building, and then as they went on, they became successful, more and more successful, and just didn't have spare time.
To feed back into
so that's what I mean by the two sides of the coin.
Okay. And so if AFTA was to reform, and what would be the how would it be done to be able to sustain itself or to keep that from happening again?
Well, I think to my thinking that's not clear. I mean, it did depend upon volunteer effort or effort that was volunteered by arts organizations, that is making the time of their executive leaders available to be able to do this. And it's a hard economic time.
Yeah.
Organizations I don't have either the money or the time to be able to do it. There doesn't seem to be sort of grant or central funding available to be able to do that. So I really don't have an answer.
And what would make AFTA different from the Town Arts Committee? I mean, different in its function? seems like you've sort of just, the Town Arts Committee is doing some of what AFTA did, unless I'm mistaken.
I think that the Town Arts Committee is that liaison between the town, the town with capital T, and the arts. The town with the capital T, the community, using the arts as the vehicle. The AFTA, or Arts Council, has a different mandate, and that is to strengthen the arts organizations or artists under its umbrella.
If there were not, if money were not an issue, and the town were able to say, okay, we're going to create a position like an art coordinator or fund some type of board or group or entity that would move things forward, what did you guys gather would be the best way to do that? Or, I realize that's a very open-ended question.
Yeah.
But I mean, if the pragmatic issues were aside, what do you think would be best for encouraging a flourishing art community? Because it sounds like you're
Yeah.
saying there's not enough volunteer hours to get what needs to be
Right.
done. But what do you think the best way to accomplish it is, if you could?
Yeah, I'll put out in simplest of terms a place, some sort of a junction, a central place for them, and then a person, quarter-time, part-time, whatever, to start to man that place to be the nexus of information gathering, sharing, joint marketing, all that.
Kind of like a website?
Well, a website can do some, but not, it does not take the place of human interaction,
Right.
I don't think.
Was AFTA responsible for the, they're not really trifolds, but those, they were,
Yeah.
that were in the
Yeah.
River Garden for a
Yeah.
long time,
Yeah.
with little descriptions of all the
Yeah.
different
If,
organizations.
I found it interesting at the economic development meeting the other night that there was some discussion about 05301, the festival 05301, and it never was mentioned that it was spawned from the Arts Council. It was, people were trying to figure out if it was BABB or Chamber or whatever, and and that's great. It was there. It was terrific, but that's kind of an example of what happens when you don't have infrastructure.
But information sharing is the most valuable.
That's what was
Goal.
identified at each of the tables in the charrette.
Okay. I don't mean this in an adversarial way at all, but I just wonder why is it that way?
I think the community interacts in a very positive, useful way, and it interacts better if it can talk to each other.
You mean if there's like a central clearinghouse
Right.
sort of?
One of the things that AFTA did in conjunction with the Arts Council was to hold a summit of invited arts leaders with a nationally recognized facilitator to take the pulse of where are we as a community and what do we need, and specifically looking at what would be the role of what does the community need from an arts council, and how does that function. And at about the same time, there was also an artist town meeting that I think had about 200 people attended, sort of an open format. And the goals that we're looking at here for the town plan, I think are all consistent. That is, that the findings of, or the concerns that came up at the town meeting, the concerns that came up at the charrette from this arts leaders forum, they're all very consistent. It's clear that folks are talking about the same community here. One of the things that's been consistent has been frustration around scheduling, of being able to know what other organizations or groups have planned to do. And many of us have been working, Kate particularly, in trying to find a solution for that. Currently, the Arts Council is working with the Chamber of Commerce to put within the Chamber of Commerce's website a comprehensive planning and publicity calendar for all kinds of events within the community. But it would be a place where if someone is thinking about doing something, they can go and look and see what other people may not have publicly planned, publicly announced, but are planning for a particular date. And this is just not to restrict what people do and what happens in the community, but that it's done with the greatest amount of knowledge, so that things can be planned appropriately.
Yeah, yeah.
So that folks don't lose money, that we bring the most number of people in, that the organizations get the most benefit from the events, the art that they're producing.
Well, that's
And it's-
sensible. Makes sense.
It's been very frustrating to have that happen. Currently, grant proposals are being written, or grant applications from the chamber to be able to bring in the money to. This would be a web-based solution.
So is this on the draft here that you have on the bottom of the front page under information sharing? It sounds like, to me, action item 2 is a little bit of what you're talking about. Would that be correct?
Can you read it out, please?
Research what information sharing networks are already in use, and you do say after Chamber of Commerce. I mean, that would be sounds
Well-
like that would be a step under that goal, or action step.
Yeah, I think we actually took that, when we took the idea of the calendar and felt that a partnership between the Arts Council and the Chamber might further that, that, I can't remember, but I think that might have come out of the thinking from the charrette.
So that's moving forward.
Are there things that the town does or ways that the municipal government works that get in the way? Well, no, or the, the kind
I
of
can't
thing that could
imagine
be
it.
phased out over a time of the next town plan, or is it more constructive stuff?
very
that-
constructive.
I'd like to say extraordinarily few things have ever got in the way of the channels of communication.
I don't just mean that, I'm sorry.
So,
I was just asking the general question, not just in information sharing, but anything.
and that's my answer. I don't completely agree with it. It's been actually extraordinary, the degree of willingness and openness that we, as the new kids in the playground, have received from everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
So if an artist wanted to, say, do something in the public space, they looked down on the Whetstone River and saw that cement face is covered in graffiti and, said, I want to do a mural there. There's not too many barriers. It's a fairly decent system, say, for that. That's the first thing that comes to
There
mind.
certainly are barriers, but then to get the best possible relationship
Not-
between the artist, the town, and the public space.
But not unreasonable, you don't think?
Very far from unreasonable.
Okay.
I suspect we'd all struggle to think of the number of times we've had to say no. We definitely had to say no. But I'd say overwhelmingly the times when we've been able to create an environment of saying yes, so that really all the constituents are served appropriately, I think has been very, very high.
Was the sidewalk art an example of one of those things
Yes.
that
The-
came sort of from others and through you guys, and then through the town?
The idea came out of the charrette. A fellow at the charrette, Gary Jones, thought the idea, brought it to us. Then we talked with Steve Barrett, and he was a perfect example of what our experience has basically been. He says yes, and then we try to figure out the details. If we went to him and he said, no, I think that's got a lot of problems. It did have a lot of problems, but we figured them out, and well, most of them. Yeah.
So it was a good collaboration.
Yeah, great, just great.
I personally feel we've been very honoured by a number of town officers approaching us saying, what do we do with this?
Yeah.
It's happened with the police, it's happened with Public Works, and it's happened with the planning office. So these things were not necessarily at our initial instigation. And I effective and extraordinary validation for what the committee does.
I think that there are still wrinkles to be worked out. I think that we can become much more efficient. I think the goal is to allow art and artists' work to be in public places in a way that does not embarrass the town, does not put the town in any kind of a liability situation, where there's clear communication with the artists about what's expected, so that it can happen and it can succeed and everyone will feel very good about it. And I think that we have lots of positive things that have happened. I think that the more experience we get with this, the better we will be at making sure that everyone's interests are protected and that it is a speedy and straightforward process.
Is there I mean, do you have a sense that there would be a way to create that as a default, where there's a project being planned, that there would be input from the Arts Committee at some point in the process? For instance, the Whetstone Bridge, the Citizens, whatever it's called, Citizens Bridge.
Don't bring that up.
When a project like that is on the drawing boards, well, would you think that the Arts Committee then would approach Public Works to talk about something like
Yeah.
that?
Are you talking about kind of art installation?
Some sort of enhancement of a project,
Yeah,
for
I'd say
public art.
that's underway. That's actually committee business that we've been dealing with.
Yeah.
I think I'd go so far as to say the, whatever they're called in construction terminology, the guardrail things along the side, had some input from a meeting. Steve came to a committee meeting and we talked about what they were going to look like, and if we could suggest that they match up with the ones down on the bridge at Main Street over the Whetstone.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, would you say that that's just going to be part of the Arts Committee's regular work? I mean, is it on its way to being kind of institutionalized in that way?
I'm not understanding what the it part of your question.
Well, that kind of effort. I mean, a project could get planned and you may not hear about it, and then the sort of the timeline might have gone too far for there to be some kind of public art included. I'm just wondering if there's a way to make it so it's not by happenstance necessarily, but I mean, that's the sort of thing that I could see us putting into the town plan as this is where we want to get with that, so that there is a, if not a guarantee of a certain amount of public art, at least it will be a consideration in planning of public works.
The Union Station project is a good example of that. So there's the bus shelter that is going to be the result of a process that was a joint effort between the Town Arts Committee and the museum and the Union Station Committee. But that said, there are plenty of other opportunities in that development that could be enhanced by participation from the Arts Committee.
Right. So, okay.
Carrie, is it a misreading of your question to put it like this? So, are you saying that you could offer through the town plan an invitation, a greater invitation, something approaching a requirement for a government office in appropriate circumstances for appropriate projects to seek the involvement of the town committee? How close am I to what you were
I think something like that. I mean, when I think about the opportunities for the town with a big T to participate in art and in the arts effort and promoting art, I mean, that's one that seems like it has happened and it can happen. But I would think not that it's well, just what you said. I think, that it be something that is considered, but routinely considered, and, on the face of whatever the thing is, be evaluated and then either included or not. But at least have it be part of the process. Like a lot of things are part of the process, you know. Judy?
So when we wrote the 5 goals, I don't think we added anything that didn't come out of what we were calling the charrette meeting. But this suggestion that you're making brings a nice bill to me personally. It's nothing that the committee has ever sat down and said, let's put that into the town plan. So that's one thing I want to say, but I want to say something else too when I got the microphone. It's that it hasn't been mentioned yet in this discussion that we have a town arts policy which guides the selection of if someone would someone else want to say this? I think I'm losing it. If someone else gets that when there's a public place that could have public art, who gets to do it? How is that chosen? And we have a pretty nice policy that guides all that, which you ought to know about.
You do have one?
We do.
The committee does?
At the urging of the planning department.
Yep. It's all right.
Right. Do you want a copy?
Feels like ancient history now, but yes.
Well, we can send you a copy of
Us
it.
and
Okay.
approach.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, this is the functioning policy by which we can make space available to artists. The way that we've done that is through this policy.
So I could imagine sitting down with the capital budget plan that talks about infrastructure, and you guys like imagining, what if this happens in 2 years, you know? What, you know, and doing it a little like that. I'm not saying that whatever you say is going to happen, but I'm saying that, you know, it would be good for the arts committee to be aware of some of the opportunities that may come up in the future, and have a forum to speak about that.
Now, I don't see us being proactive in doing that. That is, of having our own sort of watchdog, of looking out for there's a town project and how are we going to get involved. But I think that it's certainly in the spirit of the former town plan. And I think that our role as trying to bring the community's artistic people and also values into projects that happen. I think that is our role, and I think that as we are able to do that successfully, it'll become more natural for that to happen in the future. I think that, but I think that having something within the plan, that part of the goal for the town is that that development that the town is involved with will be in keeping with the aesthetic tastes of the town and use the artistic energy and genius that there is within the community. That's our job. So if that's there, then it would naturally get funneled to us to be able to help make that happen.
I have a question for you folks as well as our good planning office. When I think of a successful arts town, I often think of Shelburne Falls, which has nice neighborhoods, like seemingly a pretty good economy that's bolstered a lot by that art. Was there an element of planning, or did it just come together, the right combination of people in the right place? And it may be that no one knows.
I don't know.
Just curious.
It's good. It's very likely to be.
Was it the flowers?
It's nice to have them there already, isn't it? It's something to build on.
It's a great question. I would love to explore that and find out. Just
If you guys,
We know what's happening.
if you guys do and find out, that would be, I think, really
Yeah.
useful information for me.
But there is a lot of, sorry to interrupt, but there's a lot of information about other communities where it's exactly how they've done it,
Mhm.
through planning processes and, careful targeting of demographics and analysis of data, presenting that in exactly the right way to build a creative economy and arts economy.
Yeah, I remember your stuff about Burlington. The only reason I thought about Shelburne Falls is because I think it's a good analog, on the water, about the same size,
right.
same kind of group of people and tourist flow.
Just one name to help explain part of Shelburne Falls, and it's Bill Crosby, who's a
Oh.
major benefactor for the community as a whole. He's a large.
Does anybody know him here?
Yeah, I've seen one of his sneakers, but no, he's at city. I mean, that's one of the links there.
Okay.
But what I'd say is that, and sometimes that's the sort of the little grain that grows the pearl. It's pretty clear at this point that even if you took him or his resources out of the picture, that Shelburne Falls would survive. So I think that there is some kind of coalescence around that.
Mhm.
That's interesting to
They
observe.
would survive or would not?
Would survive.
Would.
Yeah.
But a great example of real definite clear planning is in the Berkshires with the Berkshire Creative and the
Yeah.
effort of the Massachusetts Cultural Agency to develop what was definitely in decline and is now benefiting.
Yeah.
To what degree, I don't know if that's measurable
Yeah.
yet, but there's definitely work, it's definitely turning into a different direction.
Yeah, I'd say Pittsfield and North Adams are interesting community examples of a much more programmatic approach than Shelburne Falls. Yeah.
And Greenfield now has a big developing arts
Yep.
incubator right in the center of town. Of course, that's been funded by one person, I think, or
Right.
or a small consortium of people.
So it's almost 5 of 7, and I think now that we have a fourth person here, maybe we shouldn't figure on being done at 7. I know that Carolina's leaving, and I know that you has to leave, but the rest of us are still here. I would just continue this discussion if we can.
Right.
Can we?
Well, you can continue the discussion, but at 3, you're still
I know we're not going to vote on
not
anything.
transacting
and
anything.
I think we're just having the discussion that we can have with everybody here.
Right.
Okay, or?
Yeah, sure. That means no rule against it.
Okay.
We consider the printed questions that you sent us very pertinent and very intelligent. And there are several things that Gary and Carolina says that I would hope begin to answer some of the questions that you have. So we spent so much time talking about Ascot, but we've already identified, probably not completion, probably not with anything approaching yeses from all sides. But you talk in your question about division of labor. Should these things happen, who's going to implement the action plans? And so we've really started to do that and look at who might be able to do that. Definitely after has come up for some things, and we'd be happy to go down the list of how some of these action plans might be implemented as we go on. I don't know if it's
Why don't-
useful to you to return the question. but
Well, why don't we
have
do
a lot
that?
of-
I think if it's okay with everybody, why don't we do that? Because they are great questions.
Do you have a couple of questions you can share?
Yeah, we have extras.
I should just back up 1 minute and say, as a commission, we're charged with writing the town plan, and it's Judy, when you were saying we're volunteers and all the things you were saying, that holds true for us, and this is as a group our first effort in this. Rod and Sue have each been involved with several of these kind of efforts in the past, but I think in some ways we're feeling our way through this, and one of the kind of push-pull things in all this is what becomes the town plan, and our part in it, and an organization like all the several organizations that are involved, that you guys are involved with, because there's an energy committee in town, there's a conservation committee and so forth, and or commission, and so I think we're feeling our way through that now, and even even how to do these discussions is something that we're feeling our way through. And, you know, unfortunately, or fortunately, or just maybe realistically, there's a lot of limitations to what the town can do. Realistically, given the financial restrictions that we're always under, not just now, and given the personnel limitations and so forth. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about these things and try to figure them out, you know. We're very, I think everybody on the commission, as well as the office, we're all, I think, wanting to make the plan something that's useful and something that is realistic for people to use day to day, week to week, you know, and help to guide actions. And so I think that's where we are coming from as a group. And so that's all I have to say about that.
Would you be willing to talk a bit more about the relationship of the town plan to responsiveness of offices and requirements once it's done? Because I understand there's been debate about that, and that would help us to know. So the ultimate purpose of the town plan, as you ladies and gentlemen are looking at it right now.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm the one to talk about that, or if, I don't know if Rod, you want to tackle that, or Sue, but I'll start by saying that it's probably, there's always this discussion, and I've heard this for years and years, about whether it's a should or a shall, you know, and I think it's more like a should than a shall, and I think it's a way for instance, the Planning Commission to say this is the sentiment in the town plan. Let's see if we can follow this when we're, for instance, we have to rewrite the subdivision regulations at some point. Well, there's an awful lot that will be in the land use part of the town plan that should, to some extent, guide that. You know, it shouldn't be in conflict. One of the things that we're talking about is integrating to some extent, the town plan and the capital plan, which is, you know, has never been done before in Brattleboro. You know, and so it, you know, on the face of it, it's silly that it hasn't, but you know, it hasn't. And so if you're planning on building a building or buying equipment or something like that in the capital plan, but the town plan is in conflict with that, or the town plan wants to recommend all these different things and the capital plan doesn't provide for them, then, you know, something's not going to happen the way it was written, you know, and so it's a guide, I think, and not meant to be something that has the force of an ordinance, for instance, which that would be a shall. And if we had to write it as a shall, it would never get written, you know, and it would be, we know how hard it is to write an ordinance, for instance, and that covers a sort of a little slice of life. So if we had to write a town plan like that, it would be really difficult, so.
Wouldn't be the plan anymore, it'd be the rules.
It would be the rules, and it would be against the rules to write one like that, so. And I don't, is it anything else about that, Rod?
No, if I understood the question correctly, Hugh, the plan, yeah, the important distinction here is the plan doesn't dictate in any direct way the work or workings of any individual town department. It's it's you know, it's a guide. It's hopefully meant more to reflect, as Gary said before, community sentiment and other key, you know, stakeholders' views of what needs to happen at the time the plan is developed, so that the depth of commitment that people feel to the plan is the fuel, if you like, that drives its implementation. So the greater, you know, buy-in or commitment you get from the broad community at the time of its adoption, the more likely it is that you'll see things implemented. What we also think is, again, different from previous plans, by focusing on actually how to implement what the plan discusses, then people will have a better roadmap, to use an overused term, for actually, you know, bringing that about. And then the last comment, somewhat of a tangent, is that the origins of town plans here, as they are everywhere else pretty much in the US, is that they grew out of land use regulation. So it's much more about rule making and rule implementing to some extent than in terms of its origins than it is now. So now what we're trying to do here is have a much broader document that doesn't just deal with land use regulation, but speaks about the entire community's experience of the place that is Brattleboro. In that way, you know, guide its development. But I think a word much stronger than guide is pretty difficult to do.
So I didn't mean to, thank you very much to both of you. I didn't mean to throw a hot potato into the middle of the room so much as to receive guidance, as it, of course, it's in our interest to position ourselves as powerfully as possible within what's available to us.
Right.
And you know, we'll take guidance from you, what is going to be most useful in doing that, without, of course, without betraying the things that we want to bring to the table. They're not ours, they're the public's. These are the charrette things. So we welcome your assistance in searching for the most potent way in living within this should, rather than the non-existent shall that you've described.
And I think one thing that is hard in this is, you know, what the town with a big T, you know, the town government, the town staff, and boards and commissions and things can hope to accomplish, and how to state those things as goals and then action plans and so forth. Then the things that don't live in that realm, how do we try to use the influence of the town plan to try to make those things happen, or to help those things along, or how do we express support for particular things that the town isn't necessarily going to be involved in at all, except to use, I guess, the bully pulpit or whatever, you know. And I don't know if the town plan is an appropriate place for that. I really don't, you know. It doesn't make those goals less important. It just means that they may be carried out more appropriately in through another organization, which is in a way what I was talking about before, Judy, when you asked me if that's what I was talking about. I think, you know, I mean, I think these goals and action plans are great, and I think the vision is really great. We just have to find the way that it's going to fit into the town plan, you know. So and that's our challenge, you know. So, but the more I think, you know, we can understand it, I think the better for us as a group. So would you like to go through those questions?
I would, but it's
I
kind
know
of
you have to leave, but would somebody?
some people
Excuse me.
Oh,
Excuse me.
okay. Well, thanks for coming.
Okay, thanks, Hugh. Catch you later.
Okay.
Your responses to Thanks, Joelle.
Thanks for coming in.
Oopsie, I'm still here.
That was quick.
I'll be along.
Welcome back.
I might not stay the whole evening. I'm a little distressed.
So,
So we have a list of the questions. Do we
Yeah.
want to just kind of run through them?
yeah.
So we made up a list of what organizations and committees do you anticipate doing the work, is your question, for the various actions listed.
Can I just
Yes.
interrupt for a second? I just want to clarify, Gary, these were the questions that I sent to email after our discussion last week. They're not the
Oh, okay.
arts and cultural
It's a different set
discussion
of
questions, yes.
Aha.
Okay.
Gary and I met last Wednesday, and
Okay.
yeah.
Well, we actually have two sets.
My
here.
first question
Yeah.
is, what set of questions are we talking about?
The ones
What
Sue
role
sent
should
us.
these questions form in our discussion?
Right.
Okay. Can you just read the question that you have again?
Yeah.
I can. For the various actions listed, what organizations and committees do you anticipate doing the work? Is that-
Okay, and then you've got a list, right?
Yeah, and then we got a list. Is that
Yeah.
common ground for everyone here?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to say is, these are just ideas that we've got, suggestions to the groups. We would need to ask them if they'd be willing to take this on.
Yeah.
So there's suggestions, and we all pretty much agree on the answers, but it might just be one or two or a bunch of them. So with the economic development goal, which was to annually collect, publish, and disseminate data detailing the influence of both for-profit and nonprofit artists, designers, arts, and cultural organizations on the economy of the town. To do that, that is something that AFTA, if it's revived, could do, or some sort of pan-Brattleboro arts group.
So you mean like the Wyndham Arts?
Like an umbrella organization,
Oh.
so the Arts Council could do it, the Brattleboro Arts Initiative could do it, or it could be a consortium.
Okay.
It's a big job, so it's going to need a lot of volunteers for that. Then the accessibility to the arts goal, which is to address the economic, physical, social, cultural, educational, and age-related reasons that may limit accessibility to the arts in Brattleboro. Action item 1 is to gather pertinent data. 2 is to begin to solve the inequity. And 3 is to plan with local educators. That then is something that we thought would be interesting to have as a division of perhaps BDCC. BABB, to develop a arts nucleus, but other organizations dealing with community development to address this and share skill sets, because we would have the networking skill set, but we wouldn't necessarily have the approach to this sort of a goal that would be consistent with economic inquiry.
So do you mean BDCC and BABB might have somebody in their organization
Yeah.
that would look at accessibility
Right,
and
especially the economic accessibility issues.
Is that, oh, sorry. Is that the big accessibility issue?
No, I wouldn't, they're
Oh.
all,
Okay. So this includes, I presume, literal physical
Yes.
disabilities accessibility as well? Okay.
yes.
I think I would say that the economic one is the one that is, that folks are most aware of.
Okay.
And perhaps also might be the one that, I was going to say might be easiest to solve, but it is most on people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
So would that be like scholarships for people who, for kids maybe that can't afford to be involved with musical or art endeavors or classes?
That's one way.
That's
Yeah, we had
one thing,
talked,
yeah.
we had begun conversations about sort of a voucher system.
Yeah, and to a large extent, I think where the social aspect comes in is having a population that doesn't apply because they don't think that it's there. So that if they're, that's the social component of this also ends up being an economic component, or that an economic solution can be a step toward opening up the social, or breaking down the social barriers.
Yeah, yeah. So anything that might inhibit that, but it could be a sort of gone after in a way that would make it, open it up for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to form sort of an ad hoc committee that would take this on as a task, limited amount of time to get the job done. And once the job is done, it's done.
But I think that to be realistic, increasing accessibility to the arts is largely a money issue. You know, that I think that most organizations would love to do it. Some know better than others how to do it, but it comes down to a question of they don't have the money to do it, and they have to provide that most of the arts that are provided in this community are on a fee-for-service basis, and if you don't have the fee, you don't get the service. And some amount can be stretched, but how do we stretch that further? I think I would like to just put a big appreciation into what the public schools do in this community to making arts widely accessible. And I think that if you look at what's there, there is a place where the arts are at least financially accessible across the board.
Yeah.
One of the great things about the town is that there's so much beyond what happens within the public education that is available, and that's where the accessibility starts to break down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just ask, for my own education, other than fee for service and taking it outside of the public schools, what are other ways to provide access to the arts?
For education or for just
Well, Doug mentioned fee for service. I mean, are there other ways to yeah, I guess for...
Yeah, well, yeah, I can maybe give you an example. One thing that's really early on in its development is Molly Burke is beginning a Art in the Neighborhood program that is presently funded by various foundations.
Okay.
And it is, its purpose, it's under the umbrella of the Arts Council, and its purpose is to go to underserved or not yet reached areas.
Westgate and Canal Street are
Right.
two of the prime.
So kind of like donor or charity?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
so she takes that out and it's, we're trying to develop it that she brings them in as well, so. Is that
Yeah.
what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So others like that, or any public art event, any public art period is,
Yeah.
enhances the,
Yeah, so like Gallery Walk, which is free.
Yeah,
And,
and the sidewalks now.
Yeah.
It's
concerts,
right there, right
outdoor
under your feet.
concerts
Yeah,
in
outdoor
the summer.
concerts.
Yep, outdoor
Yeah,
concerts, yeah,
right.
okay.
Yeah.
Right.
There's
I
a
think-
lot of concerts that are by donation, so you can go and anybody is welcome.
I think to the extent that art does become something which is in the public sphere, where everyone is equal, rather than in the private sphere where it's equal as how much money we have, is part of the goal. And I think that we are making great strides to getting more art into the public sphere rather than in the private sphere. I think that's part of what the Town Arts Committee, I think, is charged to do, at least within the aspects of the public space that the town, capital T, controls. And I think that will be helpful.
We're just trying to make facilities be able to be used by organizations and
Right.
open to the public. and so
So
forth.
this is an example of, some years ago, 2.5 maybe, Allison Villars came to an AFTA meeting just as an invited guest to talk about whatever she wanted to within the context of the arts and her organization. And she said that they identify lack of accessibility to the arts and to creativity as very high on the list of what the youth, the at-risk youth, were looking for. What was something that they really wished they had.
And that will make a difference.
And yes, and then
From the outcome
exactly
of their
from the
lives.
administration, and that this would make a difference.
And was that financial mostly, or, I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that had a very large role in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So the information sharing goal is to design and maintain a comprehensive information sharing network of artists and art organizations and art resources in Greater Brattleboro area. Again, some of these different groups, but I'm going to hand this to Judy, which is why I asked her to stay, because she's just got a terrific notion of how this could work.
Okay, but so this goal, which is on our to-do list, to maintain a comprehensive information sharing, that means the artists, the art organizations, any social agency that has an art component to it. So the information is there, who they are, where they are, how you contact them, what they do. That means if I'm an artist and I'm looking for someone to collaborate with, I can find them. It's just opens a lot of doors for people. It's a networking function. But the part two of this that the committee just recently started to work about, that isn't in our goals list, is to, I've got a good word for it here, to engage with the entire community about two things, and they're the two questions that match each other like this. One is, what do you need? Like the Town Arts Committee needs a videographer, a grant writer, a million things. And what do you have that you might want to contribute to the town? What do you, meaning an artist has a bright idea, they want to, whatever. It's just so open-ended, and the little buzzword we have for it is arts, the Brattleboro Arts Craigslist. So that it would probably mostly be an online thing. So that's it in a nutshell.
Sort of the same model as the time trade?
Yeah.
I can't answer that question off the top of my head.
Anybody else? Oh,
Yeah, no, that's what I was
Oh, you
thinking.
don't know what that
We were
time
both
trade is?
muttering that
I
too.
sort of do, but
Yeah.
my mind just won't go there to really
It's like-
answer you. I know I sort of know what it is, but I don't think I don't even want to try and answer it. I'm sorry.
I mean, I think the difference with the time trade is they've got somebody who's trying to organize and facilitate, whereas Craigslist is you go online and see what you're searching for.
Right. There's more of a kind of a units of value thing associated
Yeah.
with timeshare. So I'll cut your hair if you cut my grass. You know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's like reciprocation.
I would take that deal.
Whereas I would have no art to give anybody. I might be looking for a musician
it.
for something.
Right. Where this is a little bit more amorphous in terms of the value of the giving and the value of the receiving. I guess it's not.
It's not.
Well, it's
It's
not
not
a
a.
trade.
It's
It's
not
not
a
a trade.
transaction
You're right.
at all.
It's right. It's
Which
not a
is what threw
swap.
me off
It's not a
with it.
swap.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
that's cool.
So the administrative structure goal, which is to continue to build the administrative and financial structures that support community art endeavors and greater youth involvement. So with that, that the town identifies and supports grant writing for the arts sector on an ongoing basis. The grants will, A, support operating within the arts department wherever, B, will serve to connect the town to the community through the arts, C, will identify underserved, disenfranchised, and enable activities, needs, efforts, and D, market Brattleboro as an arts town for artists and an arts town as a destination.
Okay,
So in
is
a
there-
nutshell, we're looking to, we need to develop grants to help develop the arts infrastructure. So then you have, to get the grant, you have to have somebody write the grant, then you have to have somebody, then you have to have a grant to be able to get somebody to write the grant to, that's where we are.
Can we just back up? So that one was one that you were looking for the town to
Right.
assist with?
For the town to identify and support grant writing. So that can mean really,
Right.
that can be in various levels. To identify for us and just support just by giving endorsement, it would, they charge by the hour, so there's that we would need to deal with, but to just get the ball rolling on that. Then public art goal is to continue to create prominent art activities, events, physical symbols that reflect the importance of the arts in our community. So we touched on this. Gary, you, I think, articulated a fairly fleshed out idea of how that could work. Support activities of TAC by means of this town arts policy that we've got that we'll send you a copy of. It's also on the website, the town website.
Okay.
By means of the town arts policy in the role of fostering art in community venues, both performing and visual, collaborations with town departments along the model of the Department of Public Works and the Town Arts Committee and the Horizontal Art Project. So should we go on further?
Can I ask a question about public art?
Yeah.
There's a lot of public space that's privately owned,
Yeah.
every building in town, basically.
Right.
But there would be fertile ground for public art.
Right.
Is there anything the town can do to encourage that? Have you guys dealt with any private
We
people
have.
that want art that's on in their space? It's
Yeah,
kind of a great
the co-op
identifier.
came to us and asked how you do that. They've got this, new structure coming in, and there are opportunities for public art. It's not actually public because it's a privately owned concern, but they wanted to be as fair and open and encouraging of the community as possible, and they also have within their membership a lot of artists. So they wanted to know how to deal with, do we give it to the people in the membership, or do we give it to, and there are 24 skylights, they need some way to diffuse some of the light coming in. They thought those could be projects outside, et cetera, et cetera. And whereas that is not a public art opportunity, it still is something that through this policy we could advise or act as as counsel to them to develop a way to bring as many in and do it as fairly as possible and actually get to the best result as possible.
Rod, are there any limitations on art on a building in our ordinances?
Sign-
Presuming it's not an advertisement, like say it was a giant portrait of Dana that someone who wanted to put on the side of their building or something?
They can go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, the signage refers to advertising, so,
And there actually are a couple
yes.
out right now.
Right. So I think that's a good question. And the other things that I would think of would include sculpture or, other, things just attached to the side of the building, which for whatever reason we don't have a whole lot of. I don't think there's any restriction on that. You may, at street level, I mean, just things like clearing your head.
Yeah, and that is actually all included in this, which the select board approved, so it's been vetted and we have addressed a lot of these issues.
Yep.
Who administers that? Is it the planning department or the art policy?
Yeah, the arts committee is the creature of the select board and is resourced by the town manager. So they're,
And we are advisory, so we don't have control over any property. But for instance, with the parking garage, the folks that have the authority to decide what happens there came to us for advice, and we have provided the advice, and we use this policy to put something in place that, again, that we hope by having this process protects the town and allows the highest quality art that reflects the values of the town as a whole to happen in that space. These are all things that are part of this policy that we mostly stole from.
Well,
was
we
it Port
asked their,
Oregon or-
no, it was
Milwaukee,
Minneapolis,
and-
and they
One of
gave
those
us,
places.
they gave us permission. We asked.
I have one question with respect to the public art which is, I assume at some point there will be some issue where someone is upset by content.
Someone what?
Is
Yeah.
upset by
Yeah.
content. You know, it's
Yeah.
unavoidable.
Yeah.
Someone's going to find something offensive.
Yeah.
It looks like this or that. And I'm wondering if you think it's valuable to address that in the town plan. You know, that there would be a liberal take on public art where the town would try to avoid censoring content.
Right.
It's just a thought that occurred to
Yeah,
me just now.
yeah. My answer to that is that the select board appointed a town arts committee, which would be the logical vehicle for vetting some sort of public artwork.
And taking the heat.
And taking the heat.
When the shit hits the
And,
fan.
right, and that comes,
That's mixing metaphors.
Push the cough button.
Probably good right now.
that then would be vetted, and through this public art policy, which allows us to look at it in as thorough and fair a way as anybody's thought up yet. We went to the Minneapolis policy because it seemed like it was the best one. Once we've done that, and then the process goes forward where there is some piece of public art that's out there, and 100 people think it's great, but then, you know, the next 2 or 3 say it's awful, that's, they're gonna, I mean, people don't like Calders, that's gonna happen.
But you feel comfortable that you guys have the authority to avoid censorship? By someone else, you know.
You're right.
Say you have like a Manstorm situation where people don't quite know about it, and then it gets
Yeah.
put up, and then all of a sudden, rather than 2 or 3 people, you have, 48% of the town is up in arms.
Right.
And-
Masters.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
It's no pun intended, but.
right. I think that there's a differentiation there between something being censored and something being distasteful.
Oh, no, I mean, if someone tried to go over your guys' heads and get rid of it.
And get rid of it, yeah.
And I'm wondering, do you feel like you need support in the town plan, or is that something that's really not a concern for you guys?
To be honest, I haven't thought of that. I have always just relied on the fact that the select board gave us the go.
I'm probably just showing my paranoid side.
I don't know.
Yeah, I can see your point, and having something in the vision of who we are as a town that is open and accepting and imaginative, that would be grounds for supporting something like that.
But the policy has already been adopted,
Yeah.
or,
Mhm.
Yeah,
that
I don't
structure has,
think
so-
that that's necessary.
Okay.
But thanks for thinking of that.
Yeah.
I mean, if that didn't exist, that would be a worthy goal for this
Well,
town plan. but-
I think precisely the reason for having this is that this is everyone's fear, and it means that nothing happens, and that by having a policy that can be implemented, we can go beyond those fears and start to have things happen, hopefully most of which will be good and folks will feel really good about, and it will it'll snowball. That folks will say, yeah, we can do this, and it is good for the community.
Well, this might be something good to mention in the town plan, just the existence of it, because I think, I had no idea, and I mean, part of part of the point of doing the town plan is the process, and getting people aware of what other people have done and what they would like to do, so.
Would you all like a copy of this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we can get it on the
we
web-
can.
on website.
Yeah.
I've written on it a little bit, we can just copy it up right
So
now.
this would be an appendix.
Is it on the website?
It's on the
Yeah,
website.
yeah, it is.
It's on the website.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
So what other questions did you have?
What other questions did we have?
Yeah.
Well, we didn't go in that direction, we just read yours.
No, that's what I mean, the questions that
Oh,
Sue,
okay,
that Sue
okay.
forwarded to you.
Okay, where am I now? Then you have,
So I think it's been through the-
yeah, right. Specialized arts niches that exist that could benefit from increased exposure was somewhere on here. Yeah, are there specialized arts niches? Those, we talked about a little earlier as what we call sort of the under the radar or under the marquee groups that just don't have the ability to get on any kind of a marquee and likely never will. But that's the soil of the arts community to a great extent. Those not big enough to publicize or be managed or et cetera, or have an executive director or any of that. But some exist and have existed for a very long time. Others would be youth arts especially, and this is something that is identified over and over again in the charrette, and is something that's important to the Town Arts Committee, that the accessibility of the youth to the ability to make art. And so Sarah can talk to that. We have the tinderbox in here, and which is defunct, but
Right, it's no longer in existence, however, it may have been able to really benefit from some kind of help, for whether it be help in managing it, maybe taking over, someone to take over it when the people that were running it. We're done with the project. But not only the tinderbox, but anything else that would fall under that, including things that happen in the music scene that's really underground. Art scene, playwriting, and then other sectors as well.
yeah. And there's a component of artists, so talking about trying to organize artists is a really interesting subject. There's a group, I think, in any community that are just sort of blatantly non-joiner types, and yet they're really sort of fundamental to the whole arts community. So that's challenging, but it's fruitful when there is some sort of input from those who like to organize too, and from those who don't like to be organized back. So I'm just calling them individual non-joiner artists. Then arts engaged in the healing processes. This is a developing field. Story gathering, and that would include sort of archiving a town's community, the community's individual stories, just the ability to do that. Then just spontaneous, organic community art projects, maybe a neighborhood. We haven't done this particular thing here, but there was a Portland neighborhood that just decided to paint the intersection of two roads, and it just ended up being this wonderful thing, and they were able to keep it. It then provided a sort of a community glue, and it was just as an example, that was just an example.
Can I just clarify, like, the story, arts and the healing and story gathering? I mean, I think I know that there are some arts and the healing niche here, but what about the story gathering? That's something that exists that probably is not very prominent.
It's not prominent
Mhm.
at all. It's one of those under the marquee things. It's just, but there are people who do that and are really brilliant at it, and there's a very strong group in
Okay.
this area. So this is just trying to address
Yeah.
these niches that could benefit from increased exposure. Then the next question is, what role should the town play in arts investment? So, without going crazy on that one, grant writing is sort of tops the list. Recognition. So the conversation that happens because there is a town arts committee is a really valuable thing, and it is what we consider to be an investment in the arts. The continuing that conversation, enlarging that conversation, is an investment in the arts community that is beneficial.
What conversation?
That the fact that there is a town arts committee
Oh, okay. Yeah.
creates. Quantifying the value of the arts, just quantifying the value of the arts, and then marketing the quality of the arts. So if there was, if the town could play a role, for instance, in getting some of the town vehicles like BABB or BDCC or even if there was influence towards something like the chamber to market the arts more or in a better way or whatever, that would be an investment. Potentially, possibly institute a division within the Parks and Recreation, within the organizations I've already mentioned, specifically concerned with arts development.
I'm sorry, is this still question one? Or is it? Or you can do
This
all
is actually down on what role should the town play in arts investment.
Okay.
Question one.
It's a different,
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay. Then possibly identify and funnel resources for facilities which could be used for arts endeavors. For example, churches for rehearsals. The churches that, so during the week when they're not being used, if that could be invested into open, if utilities or however that could work, that could be open for rehearsals of some of these groups that are not established organizations. The River Garden for group events, spaces for meetings. Many arts groups are meeting in cafes or whatever because there isn't a place to meet.
I think this is restating, I think much of that is, most of arts investment is going to be not through the town. The town doesn't have money, it doesn't expect to have money to be able to invest in the arts. I think with the possible exception of investment in public art or design features within town projects that can be seen as being an art aspect to that. And I think we've already talked about those things. I think in terms of supporting private investment in the arts, I think part of that is having a strong statement within the town plan, so that when folks are looking for funding, either through institutions or to private donors, they can point to the fact that the arts endeavors are in keeping with the plan of the town as a whole. So I think that in and of itself is a big feature. I think having a mechanism by which specific projects can get endorsement of the town, and that I see as being a role of the town arts committee, and the extent to which a particular project is an arts project, of having an endorsement that can support looking for funding. I don't see any role for the town in controlling investment. That is of trying to direct investment in one direction or in another. That feels to me to be probably a little tricky. Should leave it to the arts organizations to direct things there. And I think to the extent to which the town can champion the arts, either through, I think partially as the town arts committee provides opportunities for town property to be, or town spaces to be, to become part of the arts community, that will inspire and open up private spaces. I think that it will also open up and inspire funding from those other sources. So I think the town continue to be supportive of art and public spaces, and bully pulpit. I think in the town plan, in other opportunities, when there's an opportunity for the select board or town officers to say good things about the arts and the place of the arts within the community, that will tend to open up money that will flow in this direction.
And link projects, like if the skateboard park happens, if that is something that there could be a collaboration between the town arts committee and the skateboard folks, so that it could actually be a public art work itself.
Yep.
On those lines.
Yep. Okay.
I think I might actually have been answering the next question.
Yeah.
That's all right. They're kind of similar.
Right.
Kate, there was a, I missed one of your points about, it was in between, it was just before Parks and Rec, to, I don't know
On
it
what
was.
role the town should play in investment?
Yeah.
Yeah, grant writing, recognition, quantify the value,
Oh,
then
yeah.
market the quality.
Okay. Yep. Quantify.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. What is the next question?
You have them now.
Well,
They're
yeah,
on
we're
your-
on, we're on the list that was in the packet now.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think Doug did hit most of two, which was, given limited resources, what can the town government do to facilitate the goals of existing non-profit arts organisations? So I think most of what he just answered addressed that pretty directly. So then that leaves us with three more. What will help the arts and cultural community bring in more investment, talent, and dollars? Distinguish between the town and community. By town, we mean Big T town.
And did your committee go through those questions, and are there any thoughts you had on them?
We did go through them a little bit. I think that we keep coming back to marketing and PR. Am I wrong saying that? That it's important to continue to voice outside of the town that we are that Brattleboro is an arts town, and in doing that and in marketing that can do all of those things.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that this goes back to the very early in the discussion that I think that that the community is under-organized, and that with organization and bringing things into line, I think that there's an opportunity to do much more to achieve these things. It isn't clear to me how we get there, again, because we're working with volunteer labor, and there isn't a clear focus for that to happen currently.
Okay.
So I'm kind of repeating what I said earlier, but hopefully not in the same words. that art begets art. So the more art there is in the atmosphere, the more it continues. And that's why I think this networking, information sharing component is really key, because, you know, how many preschool mothers would love an art group for their kids? I mean, it's just like a no-brainer. So if we could make a system or structure for these people to get together, the people who want it and the people who have it, I just think it couldn't help but, you know, raise the level.
And that touches on then the question, are there ways that art can be used to support neighborhood development? Well, that's a perfect example of young mothers with children. You can go to NEYT and there's a children's mother and children song group there.
It's not free.
But it's not free. It's not free. And so, for instance, Molly, with this idea of the art in the neighborhood, that could certainly expand into a number of different disciplines. If she had a small staff, you know, is exactly as Judy was saying, art begets art, it just would grow and grow. So that there is a ton of case studies and literature on how arts develop neighborhoods, how art revitalizes neighborhoods, and if you want it, I've got reams of it. But there does seem to be a case to be made that that the arts can be used as community development. This is the project that the NEA is on now, is called Creative Placemaking, and it's their initiative for this year is to realize that community building and arts building are one and the same thing. The facilities and festivals and all of that, there's, you know, I think we could probably come up with a huge list of what could happen. There is a little bit of talk right now of developing a museum for the train, the history of trains in this area, down potentially in part of or one of the buildings that used to be involved in that. Doug, do you want to speak to that a little bit? It's in very early.
Well, I think that this is a very fertile community in terms of ideas, and which is one of the assets in maintaining a strong cultural, artistic community, is that you get all kinds of crazy ideas, and some of them are going to be good, you know, that are coming up. It makes the whole community creative. I think in terms of specific festivals, it doesn't feel to me as though we have, again, a central clearinghouse of folks that are thinking about, well, where does it fit in? What is the missing niche? I don't see that anyone is doing that thinking currently. And I know that the chamber is getting involved. This is something that AFTA did. It's something, I mean, we had a proposal come to us of someone who wanted to do a summer art festival. So I think that the existence of the Town Arts Committee will facilitate this happening. I don't see anyone doing the thinking about what does a healthy big picture look like, and what are the missing holes.
Are you trying to address question 5 on there? What facilities, festivals?
Right.
Oh, that was actually more.
Existing.
Yeah.
Rather than.
Yeah. So that.
Right.
Yeah, that inventory that I passed. Yeah.
Just
not what are the gaps,
Okay.
but
Right.
more
Good.
what are we missing.
Although that's an interesting list and something that I think is valuable to know that people are working on, but mostly what we meant was we're out of touch enough to say.
Right. We have your list, and we're going to spend some more
Good.
time.
Yeah, and it was meant to just kind of be a jumping off point.
Right.
And the Planning Commission received it too, and one of the things, that was the existing town plan, and I know a lot of work went into that, I was actually thinking of simplifying it and creating more of maybe a table format.
Yeah.
One where it's maybe venues, another one where it's maybe arts organizations, and then maybe,
Right.
you know, some other like educational programs. So you might actually show up on a couple different lists. But I actually thought that maybe moving forward, some sort of format like that might be more useful than actually giving a little bit of history of each of the groups or organizations. And I'm interested in the feedback. I didn't want to throw that out because I know somebody gave a lot of work to that.
So this was a compendium that was done then, which
Oh,
I
this
think
is
you've done a pretty good job of getting most of the
Okay, great.
things that are there.
Yep.
And I think someplace in my computer I have a rewrite of that section that was done a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I don't have that. I'd love to get it.
If I can find it, again, I think that you've got most everything there. And part of the reason why a lot of us live in this community is because it is changing so much.
It's ever changing.
The arts community is so vital,
Right.
and it's just constantly changing.
Well, one of the things, like with the venues, like so the Jazz Center has a performance hall. Well, what's the number of, you know, seats in there? So it might be to somebody who's a little bit under the ground, under marquee, might not know about all the facilities and can reach out and know
Yeah.
where they might be able to
we'll-
rent space.
Yeah, I'll just put in a plug again for what a difference it would make if there were a central
Right.
staffed
Yeah.
resource.
Right.
That Brattleboro Arts Initiative a few years ago did an inventory, but it's out of date. You know, and to have a place where you could go. You're looking for a venue for
Right.
so many seats
Okay.
with such technical support.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to spend too much time on the telephone. You don't have to, rely on chance, to be able to find it. But there could be a central place that would allow things to happen.
Yeah.
And there are so many opportunities. I mean, it's with venues, with human resources, with technical support, funding possibilities. And all of these things lend themselves to some central organization, and we currently don't have it, at least not in a way that functions.
So I think I'd like to turn the inventory piece that you all got a copy of into maybe the start of that. Some
And it would be really interesting, I think, to especially hear or read about or see people and organizations that fit into the niches, because by their nature, I haven't heard of them, or
Right.
I've heard of a few, I'm sure, but it would be really interesting, for instance, with youth arts and with under the marquee artists, things like that. It'd be
Well-
great to see who those people might be, even if they're fleeting. It's
Right. Yeah. Theater for disabled was definitely a niche
uh-huh.
group 10 years ago, and look what's happening with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think we should end at 8 at the latest, and we could end at 3 minutes if we needed to. But this has been great. I really appreciate you coming, and apologize that we're not all here for this, but this has been great input for us. And I'm sure that as this goes on, then we'll keep communicating. I would imagine that at some point we'll have another get-together about the arts, but I think it's probably time to work on it now, so, but if you, when you develop more stuff, if you could forward it to the planning department, and I think we'll all get notice of that and be able to read what you're doing. And think it's great. Thanks for doing it.
Great, thank you for inviting us.
You're welcome.
Should I even make the motion, or is it just,
This
we
is-
never really started?
You don't,
We never
you
really-
don't even have to.
This is one of those, we're the board that never adjourned, right? Every time I make that joke, I feel so old.